I thought climbing was gonna be about getting stronger. I couldn't have been more wrong. In the last side quest of the month, I challenged myself to bowling. My goal was to score a score of 150, and I fell short. This month, I decided to take on another challenge. My goal was to climb a V5 in just 30 days. The only problem was, I've never climbed before. I decided to take on the challenge of bouldering as I wanted something that could replace the gym. Something that could be fun and something I can learn. I always enjoy trying and doing different sports. Boulders or climbing routes are assigned different grades from VB, V1 to V10 in this gym. VB and V1 being the easiest grade and V10 being the hardest grade. For this challenge, I chose my goal being V5, and I would find out later that was going to be very hard to get. My early days of climbing were spent challenging a bunch of V1s just to get used to climbing, and also taking on a couple of V2s, as you can see here. I also didn't do any research, I just kind of threw myself in it, so I didn't know any technique or how I was supposed to do something. I was just kind of winging it. During the early days when I was climbing, I was using a lot of strength, leading to me needing a good amount of breaks. It also brought along the question of how long should I rest? I was resting for maybe 30 seconds and jumping back into it, which I guess was fine because I was taking on just V1s and V2s. They didn't really take as much strength. I would mostly feel it in my fingers, and I would take a break because of that. This didn't surprise me too much because there's not much things you can do to increase your finger strength. Nothing like climbing. At this point, I'm taking on a lot more V2s, and what I quickly noticed was the holds aren't as good as V1s. And it was something I had to gradually get used to. Kind of re-grip it a different way, or kind of lean more weight towards one side. I started off climbing really slow, as you can see here, being very particular with the steps I took and how I would set myself up to reach different holds. This was my least favorite type of climbs, overhangs, as I was using a lot of strength, which sent a bunch of load towards my arms, and I was starting to feel it more. Each climb was allowing me to get stronger and stronger, allowing me to finally attempt a V3, which I was able to get. Getting my first V3 felt like proof that I was improving, but I wasn't climbing the right way. I was heavily relying on my strength to get me past a lot of these boulders, which would leave me tired, and also I wasn't taking the most efficient routes. As I was taking on harder and harder boulders, I found myself not being able to do the boulders efficiently. I would find myself in cramped positions, not having solid footing on the footholds, and also my hands would constantly be in awkward positions. Around this time, I decided to step back. Not completely stop doing harder climbs, but go back to the lower levels and start working more on my technique. It was around this time also that I started watching more climbing videos. So I saw more advanced climbers do harder things in how they approach climbing. I also started to take on different types of climbs, Like this one, for example, where I had to push up instead of grab up and pull. I also started focusing a lot on footwork, applying a lot of tension to my legs to get more load off my arms, allowing me to climb for longer and also find better ways to climb in general. I also tried keeping my arms as straight as possible, which further decreased the load on my arms. I also cut down on my dynamic moves and started focusing on trying to do more static moves. Of course, there are times where I just had to do it. This right here was one of my favorite climbs, and the camera's a paid actor and moved up. I also took the chance to try out some of the more comp style boulders. These boulders didn't really have a grade, so it's possible it could be super hard I couldn't do them, or like this one, just manageable enough for me to do it. Here is the example of me doing this V3, and I'm trying to do this as statically as possible to save strength for the later parts of it. Unfortunately, it was something I wasn't able to complete because I was too fatigued, but I do come back to it. The difference between V1 and V3 was V1s had the better footholds. I could read the route before I even got on the wall. I didn't need to rest as much between attempts, and I could use more momentum when holding onto holds. I also trusted my footwork and my legs a lot more doing V1s. They're easier, and they felt better to me. But as I started working on my technique, everything started to transfer over to the V3s. I started becoming more confident in them, and that started to show. This led me to confront old challenges that I found really hard. It's always weird doing a route again, as you find different ways to do things. You maybe do something more awkwardly than you did it the first time, but they're all learning moments. And here, for the first time, I attempted V4. I couldn't get far in it, but this is something I'm later able to do. Here's another climb where I focus on trying to be as static as possible and kind of move like that through the whole climb. Here's another climb I had to come back to. It needed me to kind of shift my body weight under the handholds to be able to scale more higher. To add a new type of climb, here's a slab, which is not one of my favorites, but I'm able to do some of them. Also, guess what day it is? It's day 22. Time was running out fast, and I needed to make progress. I kind of wanted to stay doing V3s as there was a lot of V3s I couldn't do in the gym. For example, this one. I had to figure out a way to get up on one leg, but I kept sliding. I do one more V3 as a warm up, and then I finally go and challenge a V4, something I still haven't been able to do, 22 days in. This V4 had me stick close to the wall and try and hold on as well as I could, as a bunch of the holds were slopers, which led me to fall quite constantly. After many attempts on the V4, I decided to find a V3, which also had the sloper in it, to just practice the move. Not long after, I ran into this V4, which was a lot easier. I was super happy to finally get a V4, as we're getting close to 30 days. I also attempted this V4 again. I was very close on this try, but I didn't end up getting it. I ended up finding another V4, which took some time, but I was finally able to get it. What made V4s hard for me was the smaller holds, and also there were some positions you need to take to reach other holds. It became very important for me to have better route reading skills and kind of see where I needed to be in order to grab different holds. Finally, it was time for me to take on a V5. I found a V5 where I could play mostly to my strengths, but just because it played into my strengths doesn't mean it was gonna be easy. After weeks of climbing, I made it through the V4s, but one climb stood between me and my goal. The goal I set on day one. At this point, I wasn't wondering if climbing was hard anymore. I was wondering if I gave myself enough time. Did I give myself enough time to do V4s, to actually get comfortable with them? Was I just throwing myself into a challenge I couldn't do? Every failed climb, every sore finger, every lesson had led to this moment. Day 30. I practiced the final moves of the V5. And for once, I was able to get it. But could I put it all together? I finally did it. Not because I suddenly became stronger, but because every session taught me something. When I started this challenge, I thought the goal was to climb a V5. Turns out, the real goal was becoming the person who wouldn't quit before getting there.